running out of time. So should we move on to our next speaker? Ms. Ola Mariam?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's share the screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah. It's over here.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm super excited to have this presentation. I mean, this is so personal to me, and I wanted to go last for certain reasons. So, who is Bisola Miriam? My name is Bisola Miriam, as you all know. I used to be referred to as Bisola, but I kind of chose to start referring to myself as Bisola Miriam because I wanted people to kind of identify me differently, not just with the first name or just one name. I mean, people ask me all the time, why the two names? So that distinctiveness was the reason why I opted for that. And I mean, it's sticking already. I'm a left-hander, and I'm a narcissistic abuse survivor. I'm a single mom, and I have two lovely boys, as you can see. They are Alexander and Maximus. Alexander is a Greek name which means helper of men, and Maximus is a Greek name which also means the greatest, or which means the greatest, not also. I happen to be the founder of the Left Handers International Organization. We've done some amazing work in Nigeria, and luckily we were able to get the attention of the Global Leadership Summit at GLS 2020 this year. And our story was listed on the Global Leadership website. If you go online and just type gls.org, you'll find our story on their website. So my research interests are interpersonal communication, interpersonal violence, domestic abuse, left-handedness, and stigmatization. Lastly, I consider my research perspectives as that of a critical scholar, an interpretative and ethnographic scholar, or perhaps I can as well say I use critical, interpretive, and ethnographic lenses for the work that I do. Okay, let's move on. So when you look at this picture, what comes to mind? These two pictures rather, what comes to mind? What's the first thing that comes to mind? Just describe in one word and just drop that in the chat quickly. Or you can just say it loud. Interrupt me. What comes to mind when you look at those pictures? I can see the charts. Alone, desperation, silence, fear. Amazing. Okay. Anyone in the room?
Jeff already put fear.
Okay, fear. Oh, I didn't notice. I was just looking at the comments. Great. I mean, you all have given amazing description, and I mean, these different words kind of capture what was in the mind, what was on my mind, or what I was going through when this research idea was born, and when I chose to decide to, carry out the social justice work. So for my work, it's a lived experience kind of research because I am a victim of domestic violence. And it's just sad that despite that I'm far away from my abuser, I still experience the pain, the trauma, the loneliness, and the fear that comes with being abused, especially when people don't see the scars. They don't see they don't see the scars, right? And you still go through all of those things in your closet because your abuser emotionally abuses you. And despite that there is this distance, legally speaking, this person is not abusing you. But because of the kind of messages one gets from such a person, I mean, it's just unfortunate that you are still being abused, even though it doesn't look like you're being abused, right? So that was what led me to think about the idea. Did you say I can't get justice? Rethinking domestic violence legal assistance framework. Right, my work started from me choosing to go for counseling service at the Women and Gender Resource Center here at UA, and during the course of that, I was referred to the law clinic at the domestic violence law clinic of the University of Alabama, And yes, my case passed as a case of domestic abuse, but it is sad that there is nothing within the existing legal framework that kind of gives me that legal representation or legal assistance that I need as far as my case is concerned. And so that was the problem, and that was the dilemma in which I found myself, and I needed to do something about it. So here I say the challenge here is that my case could not fit into the existing legal frame. I think I said that already, so there is no point repeating that. So my objective was to work with the Domestic Violence Law Clinic, or DVLC. I would keep saying DVLC as I go along, so that I don't keep using the long word sentence. So my goal was to see how the clinic can provide or work towards ensuring that non-native victims of domestic violence, even though they might be miles away from abusers, can get some sort of legal assistance. Okay. Okay, so when I started this work, one of the things that we've been taught is to think of ways you want to approach your work. So for me, I said to myself, okay, what compasses will keep my social justice ship sailing? And so I thought of the paradigms and the disciplinary versus interdisciplinary lenses. I have listed them here. So for the paradigms, I consider critical and interpretive paradigms. Critical because this is such a critical issue, not just because of the emotional, the psychological, marginalization or limitations surrounding it. It's also very much an important issue when we talk about the legal framework that is currently existing, especially for non-native victims of domestic abuse, or perhaps victims of abuse who are far away from their home country or countries. Interdisciplinary wise, or disciplinary speaking, I consider myself, I looked at my work from a communication studies angle. I also explored cultural studies, rhetorical studies, feminist studies, and legal studies, because abuse is at the core of communication, at the center of communication. Cultural studies here talks about questions the way in which culture is created and maintained through everyday experiences. And abuse is a cultural problem. It is rooted in the history of different culture, different community. Rhetorically speaking, I wanted to look at the way words are framed or language is used symbolically to induce cooperation in beings, and of course, how do abusers use their words, and what is it within the existing legal framework that makes it difficult for abusers, for the abuse to get justice, even though rhetorically, language-wise, what they experience fits into the World Health Organization's description of what constitutes abuse. Now, I think I would rather move on. Legally speaking, I examine how law shapes and is shaped by political, economic, and cultural forces, which is something that I already talked about briefly. Theories and methodologies. I looked at a number of theories: attachment theory, cycle of violence theory, critical race theory, feminist theory, interpersonal deception theory, power theory, and many others that I may not be able to mention. Of course, I have them on the slides. Now, I wanted to also look at what other people are thinking, or what are people doing about this type of issue. And so that brought about the question, who is thinking about us, right? So I looked at a number of scholarly journals or scholarly papers of different people who have tried to grapple with this same question from different perspectives, and I went through them and I was able to identify what has been done and what has not been done. And from all that I gathered, I was able to realize that while there is so much information out there about domestic abuse, there's always so much emphasis on physical abuse, where there's almost, the record or the data out there does not really provide, sufficient information regarding, psychological abuse, and of course what how non-native victims are affected. One interesting thing that I also discovered during the course of my research was I saw that there are now a number of scholars who are also looking at how this is beyond a gender thing. This is not a women thing. We would naturally think that domestic violence affects women, but of course, this is a cross-cultural problem and it is no respecter of gender. So how I plan to skin the cat? So I asked myself, what data collection method do I intend to use? And after going through the whole process back and forth, I was able to identify orthoethnography and interpretive phenomenology as my data collection method. First, through the ethnographic method, I was able to start journaling my personal experiences before now, during the course of the relationship, and after I moved here, and specifically when I started receiving counseling and services from the domestic violence law clinic. I also documented my experiences during the my case review process at the law clinic. How did the clinicians attend to me? How did they talk to me over the phone? How did they describe my experience? The kind of questions they asked me, and most importantly, the feedback that I got from them. I made sure to journal everything. Now, I also turned to interpretive phenomenology because I plan to conduct in-depth interviews with non-native victims of domestic violence. In addition to that, I have spoken with, okay, I think let me move on. So furthermore, I haven't looked at previous studies. I saw that some of the method that I plan to use are being used by some other scholars, and I was able to gain quite a lot from what they have done. So the concrete data collection strategies, just like I've said, are journaling and in-depth interviews. So how do we move from here? So having done all of this, I saw that there was still so much that there were so many things. I had so many assumptions before I went into the law clinic. And at the end of the day, I learned several things. And those are the reasons, the things I learned are what I've also tried as much as possible to, articulate here. So during the course of this work, one thing that I discovered is, yes, I have been able to, take certain actions, some of which are articulating my own experiences, journaling, and working closely with the clinicians, student clinicians, And moving on, I plan to, okay, I think I missed one of the slides. So I plan to work with the director of the law clinic, even though I have been able to send out an email to her, but I have not been able to talk to her in person. And using one of the qualitative research method called email interview process, which is something I found that during the course of this process, that it is possible to actually conduct interview via email. And so sending email to her, I saw that was a qualitative method, and which of course I have succeeded in implementing. Moving on, I plan to, like I said, have an in-person interview with her. I also plan to get an IRB approval so that I can conduct in-person interviews with past beneficiaries who are non-natives and who are also domestic violence victims who, for some reasons, have their abusers far away but still experience, the trauma that comes with being a victim of domestic violence. So I had some observations, and that's why here I have how do we move from here. So from my observations, I discovered that the very first challenge the clinic has is that it is not an autonomous body. It is under the American Bar Association. And so these limitations makes it difficult for the clinic to take certain decisions or to do an overall, overhauling of the existing legal assistance framework. So in addition to that, the international nature of my case makes it even more problematic because the law in Alabama does not have in personam jurisdictum, which means so my abuser is not here, right? Even though I still get to experience everything that I would experience if I was physically in the same space with this person, it is problematic because one, the law of Alabama does not have access to this person and cannot have control over this person. And so that's one thing I discovered as an emerging theme or trend in this work. And Now, I find it very complicated and confusing, and that's why I have it here. I say, I continue to receive threatening messages which continue to leave me in fear and panic, even though the content of the law report that I got reads that a court will be unlikely to find immediate fear, being that your husband is not in Alabama. So what is disturbing is that despite that my case fits into the legal framework of what constitutes abuse, it does not carry sufficient weight to require that I receive legal action. So that is something that I found really problematic, and I intend to explore further. And I guess I've come to the end of my presentation. Two other ideas that I'd like to mention is local and international laws are very crucial in a non-native victim's ability to get justice. And I think it makes sense for law clinics, legal personnel, or people who work with victims to begin to think of ways to modify existing legal assistance frameworks for victims of abuse, especially that the global pandemic, has given us an opportunity to see the world differently. And so it's important to also view abuse differently. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share.
Some of the challenges to help us all understand it better and of course make a difference in your own life. Thank you for bringing that up. So let's see, let me pull up the slides. What is this? This will stop another person sharing. So yeah, you have to stop sharing.
Oh, sorry. I thought. Stop. Okay. Done.
Let's see, thanks. So let's see. Where did the slides go? Again, I think we kind of lost the slides. Yeah, let me close this. And so,
There they are.
yeah. So now I have to bring them up here. Yes, now
Yep, there they are.
There. Thanks so much. Oh my gosh,
We made it.
yes.
You made it.
Few minutes that we have got left. I want to take a few minutes to kind of wind up the class. We might not get a chance to use the time to get into the system.